Welcome everybody to the SFIA Foundation, and in particular to this SFIA user webinar. We've had over 600 people register for across the two sessions we're running, and that's from around 50 countries. The webinar is being recorded and we will make that available after this event. This webinar is from Grant Nicholson, the lead capability architect at the APS digital profession, and will detail developing digital and data skills and capabilities in public service organizations. Please use the Q&A feature to raise any questions you may have as we go along, and we will stop at various points through the webinar and try and answer some of those during the webinar itself, but also at the points of stopping for questions, raise a few for Grant to answer verbally. We have a couple of Grant's colleagues on the call as well, so that they can answer some of those questions in the chat. Any general SFIA inquiries we'll answer separately after the event, but please put these in the Q&A or in an email directly to the SFIA Foundation, and we can follow up with those accordingly. The SFIA community is truly global, so please take a moment to use the chat to say where you're from. This helps us to see the coverage we get and make sure that we're doing things at appropriate times. Also, if you'd like to present your story in a future SFIA webinar, then please let us know, or if there's a particular topic that you're interested in, please email the SFIA Foundation directly. With that, we'll go straight into the webinar. So I'll hand over to Grant Nicholson to describe developing digital and data skills and capabilities in public service organizations. Over to you, Grant.
Thank you very much, Ian, and hello everyone, welcome. To just set the stage for you about where I'm coming from, the digital profession that I'm from is part of the Australian federal government. So we have a organisation, the Australian Public Service Commission, that looks after capability for all the public service agencies and organisations across Australia, and we look after trying to develop the digital capabilities in that sector. We have a total workforce of about 180,000, and about 10,000 of those are digital workers. So that's the space that we are working in. I just go get straight underway with it. The Australian Public Service Commission, that's us, the Australian Public Service. We have those 10,000 people spread across the country, those 10,000 digital workers. We have people centrally located in Canberra, but as well as every state and territory across our country. There are around 200 agencies or organisations that are represented there. We support that digital workforce through the digital profession, which is a structured way of helping to guide and manage that capability. We use capability models and frameworks to describe digital roles and the capabilities required in those roles. And I'll get to a few examples of those a bit later. We've been using SFIA for quite a while. Since 2010, I started using it on SFIA version 4 and have been working through each of the versions now. We're up to version 8, so I've been following the journey of SFIA for a little while. We do use other capability frameworks as well. SFIA is the primary one we use, but we also use things like the Australian Public Service Data Capability Framework and others. I'll describe a little bit more about that later. We have a countrywide license for using SFIA. We established that last year, and what that does is enables everybody within Australia, anybody who's located or based in Australia, to use SFIA without any real concerns about licensing considerations. Nobody has to worry about managing that for themselves. Everybody can exchange all their products and materials freely that are based on SFIA. We support the public sector community of practice. So we have Australia and New Zealand joining forces on this. We have a community of practice. We have about 250 SFIA practitioners across our 2 jurisdictions who worked together to help each other in using SFIA. And we also invite in the private sector for things like looking at what could happen in the future of SFIA. So what we would be like to see in SFIA 9, for example. We just recently ran a workshop to explore across our user base as to what things we would like to see develop further in SFIA. So that's a great way for us to help improve and develop SFIA to help what people in our jurisdictions are doing. On that note, we are developing the influencing the development of SFIA and have had a successful track history in doing this. So in the development of SFIA 8, for example, our community put forward recommendations for skills related to data engineering, data science, high performance computing, machine learning, numerical analysis, and scientific modeling. We actually went to the extent of identifying that these were skills that we would like to have in SFIA, and we developed the proposed wording for them. We actually crafted those skill definitions and put them forward to the foundation for consideration, and the global community considered those and came up with what we now have in SFIA 8. We are continuing to work towards what SFIA 9 might look like. And in that workshop, I mentioned that we did the primary thing that the practitioners are looking for, that the users of SFIA are looking for, is further guidance and examples on how to use SFIA. They thought that was even more important than, for example, like extra skills added to SFIA. But of course, there were some extra skills suggested, things like mathematics and linguistics, which are related to machine learning and modern automation algorithms and so forth. So there's suggestions for skills as well, but primarily the community is looking for more guidance and examples on how to use SFIA. The community is fairly active, and of course we therefore feel that SFIA is pretty much our framework. We've been successful in getting it to include things that we are looking for, and we therefore feel we have a bit of ownership because we've been successful in influencing the way SFIA has developed. We have branded our whole of country license SFIA AU, and we encourage organisations who are producing products that they make use of that license, that leverage it. We're encouraging to use this powered by SFIA AU branding, just as a way to show that this whole of country license is being used and of benefit to people throughout the Australian community and the business community in particular. There's some more information about that if you go to our website. We have some information about where you can get a copy of that logo and how to use it and so forth, and all the conditions are related to using the SFIA AU license. It's well worth having a look at if you're producing any products or services or want to share things with other people, particularly in the Australian context, or of course we have New Zealand. Our New Zealand colleagues now also have an equivalent in New Zealand. What I'm going to be talking about very shortly in the next part of this presentation is a tool we've created called APS Career Pathfinder, which uses SFIA as its one of its main underlying frameworks to allow people to explore their career potential. The tool is an initiative of the digital profession. So we created it. We were actually looking for a way for people to explore all the potential career options they may have in the digital space and look at what capabilities are required and so on, so that we can help encourage people to develop capability in the Australian public service. And when we're looking at how to try and do that, we went through the usual cycle of doing some discovery and some user research and so forth, and it just evolved into an online tool that people can interact with. It's designed to help people compare their personal set of skills with the skills of the different roles that they could take on, so that they can see how closely they match, see what their skills gap might be, and potentially find learning solutions that will help them fill that gap so they can be ready for a job in any particular role that might be of interest to them. But it also has value for people who just want to understand what these roles might be about. And I'll show you some examples of that a bit later. SFIA is the primary framework we use, but we do use others, and we can adapt to any capability framework. So when we designed the Career Pathfinder, we made it flexible and adaptable so that it can take in any capability framework. So we're focused at the moment on digital capabilities, and very soon we're going to be adding some data capabilities, or particularly data roles. We've got data capability framework at the moment in place, but we're going to be adding data roles very shortly. We could extend that to others. If we have a framework that describes HR capability, or if we had a framework that describes the mining sector, or any area we might care to pick, our tool can take in that capability framework and allow people to explore roles and learning resources and so on based on that capability framework. It's fully data driven, so it's dynamic and updates as the data updates. We publish all the data behind Career Pathfinder on the Australian Government Open Data Repository, which is called data.gov.au. So you can go there and get a copy of all the data that we are presenting. So all the role definitions and details about the roles, all of that, even the capability frameworks and the classification definitions and all the different associated information about it. We publish all that on data.gov, so you can see what it is. We use learning catalogs to identify learning resources related to the skills described in the capability frameworks. So that's how we match the capability gap an individual has to the learning resources that might help them fill that gap. So we do it on the basis of individual skills rather than some other approaches to learning, is that each role has a list of learning related to that role. We don't do that. We have the option to do that, but what we primarily do is look at a skills basis. So if you've got 90% of the skills required for a particular role, you only need to fill that last 10%. We don't show you the 90% of the learning resources that won't be relevant to you because you've already got those skills. Pathfinder is relatively new, so our first full live release was only at the end of July. So it's a new tool. We've still got further work to do to improve it. There's lots we would like to see improved in the tool. At the moment, it's what we'd consider a minimum viable product. It's fully featured and working, but not as many features as we'd like to have. So there's lots more we would like to do. It's open for feedback too. There's a feedback mechanism inside the tool. So if you are having a play with it, you can provide us some feedback on what you would like to see further enhanced in the tool. If you spot anything that seems a bit odd to you, let us know, and we'll work towards improving it. We are working towards open source development. So we'd be happy to share this product and tool with people. We are, of course, across the Australian jurisdiction, working with our colleagues and agencies and other government organisations across Australia to be able to host their role definitions and their capability frameworks and so on in the tool. We're open to sharing the source code with other organisations and jurisdictions around the world if you would want to leverage that. Now, we haven't quite set that up yet, but if you're interested in that sort of approach, we'd be happy to hear from you, and we're working towards that in the near future. A few things before we dive into looking at Career Pathfinder itself, some background about what it's targeted at, how it's sort of the information and data behind it is structured. So we work entirely at the role level. So in our framework, we have roles and jobs. The job is the actual activity that the organization needs to be done. So an employer needs something done, they create a job and hire somebody into that job to get that work done. What they need to be done and what skills they need for that is entirely up to the organization to determine on the basis of what they need it to do. We don't put any constraints on that. We don't tell people how their jobs should look. But we do offer roles which are if you like, a template on how a job is defined. So it's a way to make it a little bit easier to understand the complexity of jobs around there if you have a structure of roles which are like common, standard, typically what some jobs might look like. And that's where we operate. We can't be providing examples of the 10,000 or so jobs that might be out there in the public service. That would be unuseful to people. So we just break that down to the role level and provide what typically a job of this nature would look like. And that way we can describe all the skills and knowledge and behavior requirements and so on that typically are required in jobs of this nature. And each individual organization then decides how they want that to look. They might have some minor variations on that. And people, of course, then get assigned to jobs, but jobs may not be available at the time a person is looking to recraft their career. So if you're looking to develop your career into a new direction, at this point in time, you don't quite have the skills you need to do some work on them. You don't know what the job's going to look like that you're eventually going to apply for. You might not be applying for that job for another 6, 12 months or more. So how do you know what to work towards when each job could be crafted individually and separately and differently? Well, that's why the roles provide you guidance. If you aim for a role, then you have a good chance of being ready for a particular job when it becomes available. In our capability model, and you might recognize this model from within the SFIA framework itself, it's a model that we built here at the Public Service Commission, shared it with the SFIA Foundation. It's now in SFIA. We focus our work for career pathways on the professional skills part of this diagram, part of this model. We are very clear that you do need the entire set of capability elements. You need to describe professional skills, behaviors, experience, knowledge. You need to describe that entire combination for an actual job. But when you're working at the role level, we can focus a lot of the effort on the professional skills, and that's what we do. And that's the area where SFIA really excels in describing the professional skills. We use a different framework for describing behaviors in the Australian Public Service. And of course, knowledge can be very specific to organizations and the context in which a job applies and so on. So we spend a lot of our time focusing on the professional skills, but we don't forget that the rest of the model is very important. We have been working through the skill sets and disciplines within the entirety of the digital and data space, but we haven't finished yet. So when you're exploring roles in Career Pathfinder, you'll find lots of them, but not every discipline is covered. So in this particular diagram, and I don't expect you'll be able to necessarily read what all of the disciplines are, but those that have a little blue star on them are indicating that we have explored those areas and we have got roles in those disciplines described. Some areas you can see are missing, like example, the data space at the moment, and the operations space. There's a fair bit of missing roles in those areas. We're working towards filling these areas and in fact refreshing the entire set. We've been running a series of workshops. What we do is we bring professionals or technical experts, practitioners from the field, from these disciplines into a workshop, and we ask them, what are the typical roles out there? What do those roles look like? What skills do they require? And we get the technical experts to tell us. We do not make up this information. We get it all from the experts in the fields. And that's one way we can say we've got some sort of reliability on what the information is about, because the experts have told us this is what their roles are and what they look like. Career Pathfinder is a tool. It currently has 179 roles in, and as I said, as we're running these workshops, we continue to update and refresh that and add more as we go along, so that will grow as time progresses. We have, at the moment, 3 capability frameworks in there. SFIA, of course, the primary one, SFIA 8. We use a cybersecurity specific framework called CISEC, comes from the UK, and we use the DCF, the Data Capability Framework, which is an Australian capability framework. So any of the roles you see in Career Pathfinder could be defined using any combination of those frameworks. Generally, only the cybersecurity roles are using CISEC, and not many of the roles, because we haven't covered the data space yet. We don't have data roles. Not many of the general digital roles have data capability framework skills, but there are some of them that do. We have the learning catalogs map, but not many. So the way our learning catalogs, the way we're working towards the learning catalogs being is related to collections that an organisation may have. So at the moment, we have one particular Australian government agency that has a catalogue of learning resources, and we've incorporated that. As we get more catalogues of learning resources, we can add those in, and then the learning options available to people will expand accordingly. We have a feature in the tool for workforce managers to find people based on their skills. But we are very sensitive to privacy considerations, and so individual users, for example, can choose whether they are discoverable or not. If they tick the little box that says that they can be discovered or that they're open for opportunities, then workforce managers looking for people with certain skills will be able to find them. At the moment, we restrict that to within an agency. So HR managers or workforce managers in a particular agency can only search people from their agency for the skills that they have. That concept will be applied agency by agency as we go along. You can use the Career Pathfinder without belonging to any Australian government agency. You can be totally anonymous, not even log in at all, or you can log in with an email address that's not a government APS agency email address and still use the tool, and you'll never be discovered for opportunities. In the future, that's a feature we could turn around to being somewhat like an expression of interest, where you could say you're interested in a job in the APS and you don't really care where, and potentially we could use that as a form of reverse recruitment, where we could find people who have certain skills we're looking for and send them an invite to apply for a job that's become available, but we're not at that point yet. Okay, I was gonna, before I dive into a live demonstration of the Career Pathfinder tool, I might just pause to see if there are any questions at this point, or and if not, then I can jump into the demonstration.
Okay, Grant, there's a couple of questions. I think Andy's got one lined up to ask from Rania. So Andy, do you want to ask that, or shall I take it?
Yeah, the question, thanks Ian. The question from Rania is whether the Career Pathfinder, whether you see it being able to be applied in an educational setting, and would it cover the roles in that context?
Yes, it could. All we need to have for it to work is a capability framework that describes education-related skills. Now, SFIA has several education-related skills in there. If those skills were adequate to describe the roles that you want to talk about in your education setting, then yes, you could use our tool. That wouldn't, without any change, for example, we could just use it with the frameworks we've currently got in there. But if you want to augment that with another capability framework that describes the education-related skills in more detail, then again, you could do that. We just have to have a chat with you about how the tool could be adapted to that. You just have to basically upload the capability framework.
Okay, and we've got two related questions around the learning catalogue. So one from Brendan Hill and one from Chris Beckham. So I'm going to try and combine the two, Grant. First of all, how did you map the learning catalogue to the capability framework, and what learning what learning catalogues do you use?
So the process for mapping them, we say that the learning resources, because it's the case at the moment that none of the learning resources were built based on the skills described in the capability frameworks. So none of them are a one-to-one match. None of them actually exactly deliver what a capability, what a skill is described in SFIA or any of the other frameworks. So what we have to do is find a mapping that basically describes how they relate. So if you have a particular skill in any of the capability frameworks, we look at the learning resources and say, which skills is this learning resource related to? And it's the factor that's relevant, and it will help develop you towards the skill. It doesn't mean that just taking that learning resource, doing that learning course or what have you, will deliver you the skill. It's relevant to it. It'll provide you some of the capability described in that skill, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to deliver you the entirety of that skill. It's a relevant learning resource, not necessarily the full picture. And sorry, the second part of that question was about which ones do we have? That at the moment is entirely up to the organisations that are developing the catalogue. So at the moment we have one catalogue which is general resources off the internet. So they're just There's only about 100 of them. They were identified by one of our partner agencies, and they just thought these were good resources and mapped them to some SFIA skills. Second catalogue is the one I mentioned from one of our other agencies that has quite a detailed catalogue. There's over 1,000 items in that catalogue, and which they've gone through, and they've just looked at the learning resources they have access internally to their organisation, and they subscribe to external services such as Pluralsight and LinkedIn Learning, and they've just identified a bunch of those training courses, those learning resources, and map those to the relevant skills in the capability frameworks, all 3 capability frameworks. That model we would run forward for future catalogues that whatever an organisation wants their staff to have access to, they just have to have the relevant learning resources mapped to the capability frameworks they use. They use their own capability framework, for example, they have to have the learning resources mapped to their capability framework.
Okay. We've got a couple more that we can, I think might be worth leaving to the end, but one quick one possibly from Kelly Ray. Could you give an explicit example of the difference between a professional skill and a technical skill?
I actually think they're the same thing. Technical skill, professional skill, we treat those as the same concept. What they differ from is behavioural skills. So professional/technical skill means a skill that is specific to a particular industry or area. It's not something that you would describe across the economy. So digital and data skills are a digital skill of programming and software development, for example, is not a skill that would come up commonly in other areas. Lawyers don't often have to have that skill described, or HR folk, or police, or what have you. So it's a skill that's specific to a particular industry segment. That's how we're describing the professional/technical skills. And every profession, the lawyers have their set of professional technical skills, and the HR people have their set of professional technical skills. Digital people have theirs. That's what are the technical or professional skills, and quite often we have specific capability frameworks that describe those technical professional skills, and that's what SFIA is for digital. Our data capability framework is for data, etc., etc.
Okay, I think we've got a couple more questions, but we'll save those for a bit later on because we'll get straight into your demonstration and pick up some of the other questions towards the end. So, excellent. Grant, do carry on.
All right, so I'm going to switch over to live demonstration of Career Pathfinder at the moment. If you get the slide deck after this presentation, it's got a walkthrough of the things I'll be showing you live in the demonstration so that you can follow through if you get this presentation offline. And it was also as a backup in case anything went wrong in this presentation, but everything seems to be working at the moment. Fingers crossed it continues to do so. So let me flip over to the live tool. So when you first arrive at Career Pathfinder, it invites you to add your skills to get started. So the main user flow we've got in the tool is that you're a person who is a career seeker. You want to explore your career options, and you you get into the tool and you set up your skill profile, and you look for what's career options might use some of the skills you already have, or you can explore things on any other basis, like your interests, for example. That's the primary way, but I'm going to start off by using it in a way that anybody could just inquire about what a role is about. So another potential way that people might like to use this tool is if you're a HR officer, for example, and you've heard of a role, but you don't quite know what it means, what it's about, what's involved. You can actually go straight up the top here into the search roles and type in a query. I'm going to type in auto, like I've heard of something called an automation tester, but I don't know what one is. How does it differ from any other type of tester? And list roles will show up related to that. Now, it does the search, makes use of the fact that we have alternative names for roles included in the system. So you can see, for example, the second role here, infrastructure engineer, showed up, even though that's got nothing to do with the keyword auto that I typed. But an alternative name for an infrastructure engineer is a cloud infrastructure automation engineer. So that's why you can use this to find however a role might be described in whatever terms you might be describing. Another common example is, for example, developers. They can be known as software engineers or coders or programmers. You type in any of those keywords and you'll find the role in our system. As well as seeing the names of roles, the ultimate names here and the different solutions, you've also got over here an indication of which collection these roles come from. At the moment, we've only got one collection in Career Pathfinder. We've got the typical APS, so the typical roles across the Australian Public Service. But we've designed it so that we can include collections of roles from specific organisations, or if there are specific thematic groups of roles, say an industry sector, for example, you could have a collection that's based on that. So in the future, you might see collections based on particular agencies or particular areas of activity. We also have, you'll notice every role when you see them has one of these little coloured boxes with something like an APS number or an EL number in them. These relate to our classification system. So that's where our behavioural skills come from and what's tied to the salary considerations for the roles. That's not an area that we're mostly focused on here, but it's a good indication. If you're going to apply for a job, that's the level of seniority, that's the level of pay that you would get if you applied for a job at those classification levels. Let me go to the automation tester role and let's have a look at some of the details. So it describes the role. There's a description there, a brief description of what the role is about. And we have, for some of our roles, more detailed information about what it's like to do that job. So in this particular case, we've got a day in the life of an automation tester. So if you come across one of those, you can go off and explore in much more detail about what it's like to be an automation tester. What's the job like? What would you be doing? What does this particular person, so in this particular case, one of our automation testers, Sarah, told us a bit of her story and what she likes about it and how she and what she does in her day-to-day job. We're providing more and more of these as we can to help people make an assessment of whether this is a career direction for themselves. We also have the listing of the skills. So in this particular case, there is some essential skills and some desirable skills for this job. For any particular skill, you can click on the skill and read what it's about. Detail. This skill comes from SFIA, as most of these skills will. This is required at level 3. There's the description of the skill. If you wanted to, for example, at this point, you could use this plus to add this skill to your collection of skills, because you might notice it's saying missing skills, missing skills. I haven't told the tool yet what skills I have. As far as it knows, I don't have any skills. So every role I look at the moment will show all the skills are missing because I don't have any of those skills as far as it knows. In a moment, I'll set up a skills profile so you can see how that works. As well as seeing what all the skills are required in this role, and I might just mention the distinction between essential and desirable skills. Essential skills are the skills that we probably wouldn't hire you if you didn't have those essential skills. The desirable skills are important skills in the role, but you could develop those on the job. So they won't necessarily stop you from being hired. Now, the guidance this gives you is that if you have got none of these skills, where do you focus your efforts first? Or focus them on the essential skills, because you won't get the job if you don't have the essential skills. If you've got those in your bag, and your kit bag, then go and have a look at the desirable skills, because those will help you beat the competition when you're applying for a job if you have all the skills, both essential and desirable. But if you only have the essential, you've still got a chance of it, because that's the core that we're looking for. You can also at this point go, how do I upskill? This is where you can see the learning resources. And the way the learning resources are identified, there can be lots of them. There can be hundreds or possibly even thousands of learning resources that might be relevant to the capability gap that you have. What the tool does is looks for them based on how many skills a particular learning resource might hit. So one learning resource, for example, might cover several of the skills. In fact, this first one covers 4 skills. The 2 of the skills you require, and there's 2 other skills that it's related to. So the tool will present to you the learning resources that have the best chance of giving most of what you need in one hit. Of course, at this point, I've got none of the skills required, so probably no combination of these would initially give me all the skills that I need. I'd have to do a lot of learning to get up to speed. When you're looking at the learning resources, if you find any that are interesting, you see this little add to plans around the place. What you can do is if you find one that sounds interesting, because you can explore them based on the way they've been recommended, or you can go through each skill that's required. So each essential and each desirable skill, you can look at all the learning related to each one of those. If any of those strikes you as being relevant to yourself, you can click add to plan, and they'll get added to your career goals collection at the top of the tool up here. You can do the same with the role itself. If the role itself is interested into, you can say add to plan, and it goes into your career plan. So it's a way you can just explore lots of different things and just add them to your shopping cart, if you like, as you're going along. You can also see if there are any jobs available in this area. So if you're interested in automation tester role, and you say, oh, are there any jobs? You can go search APS jobs. APS jobs is the jobs board for the whole of the Australian federal government. So when you get thrown over here, you can search and have a look at what jobs might be available in this field. Remember I said we have a whole bunch of alternate names in our recorded in our database. When the search comes across, it's all those alternate names are used in the search on APS jobs. So we'll find you a job across an APS job, no matter what the individual job might be called. So for example, in this particular one, I searched for automation tester, and automation test analysis are different keywords, but it still got found. Okay. I'm going to go back now to set up some skills to show you. I'm going to go back to the beginning, back where we started, and follow through actually adding some skills and seeing how that part works. There are two ways you can add your skills, tell the tool what your skills are, or build your skills profile. You can import your CV, and the machine learning algorithm will have a go at reading it and suggesting or recommending the skills that it can see in your CV, or you can do it manually. We still have to do a little bit of work in making the CV import process perfect. It's certainly not perfect at the moment. We need to improve that a little bit, but it'll have a go at trying to identify skills in your CV. If you've got a LinkedIn profile, for example, you can go to LinkedIn, copy that and paste it in there, or you can download a PDF and upload it into Pathfinder, and it'll have a go at trying to identify your skills. You'd probably get a more accurate result if you go through manually. There are two ways you can manually select skills. You can select skills one at a time. You could, for example, click on individual skills, or if you wanted to find out a bit more information, read what the skill's about. You might read that skill and look at, oh, not level 2, what is level 3 about? Actually, I think I might have level 4 of that skill. And you can go through skills one at a time, looking at each skill and deciding what level of skill you have. Or there's another way you could do it. You could find skills. Let me find the testing skill. Likewise, I could look at the testing skill, find the level that I think matches me. Okay, yep, that sounds right for me. So that's skill. So that's one way you could do it. Or you could pick a role and see there's a bunch of skills related to that role. So this test analyst, this APS 5 test analyst, it has each of those skills at the levels indicated. I could select that as a whole, and I get that entire collection of skills in one hit. Now, it may not be entirely accurate for me. I might have to, after doing that, go and edit the skills, but that's a way you can get a collection of skills all at once. Okay, so let's say I just have those 3 skills that I selected manually. I save those. There they are. I can adjust those anytime, but now I can see what roles it's suggesting for me based on those skills. So it just turns out that those 3 skills I selected give me a 100% match to a junior test analyst. So I have all the skills required for that role. In fact, there's not very many skills required for that role at all. And as you go along, you can see what the different matches, how many skills I've got that are exactly right, how many skills I might be missing, and if there are any that need an uplift, it'll show those as well. So you can go through and explore roles. They're indented here according to how closely matched they are. So as I go down the list, I get less and less of a match to my set of skills. And when I go, if I do the how to upskill picture now, the picture will be slightly different. I don't know whether you recognize the skills I looked at last time I looked at the automation tester role and the learning recommendations. Now it's a different set of learning recommendations, because now it's based on just the skill gap I have rather than all the skills required for the role. Okay. There are several ways you could review this information. So at the moment, it's looking at skills match. So the roles are displayed according to the degree to which they match my skills that I've told the tool I have. I can flip that around to looking at, for example, demand. So not necessarily what's closest to what skills I have, but what's in highest demand. What is my best longer term solution? As you can see, some of the higher demand ones are actually less of a skills match for me. And some of the lower demand ones are a higher skills match. So that's a balancing act I have to figure out. Am I really interested in what's hot at the moment, or am I interested in what uses my skills? Or in another way, there's another view entirely, which is based on interests. If you select the interests option, a set of interest areas are presented over here, and you just tell the tool what you're interested in. If I was interested in accessibility and automation and ethics, a bunch of roles will come up related to those, and you can explore those instead. And some of them, like the very first one that came up there, I don't have very much of a skills match to that role at all, but maybe that's something that I'd be really excited in doing. And that's what we're here to do, help people find out what they want to spend their time learning about, because that's where they want to take their next career step. The other filters we have, when we have other collections, they'll be showing up here. So if we have other collections of roles, you could filter it out and just look at roles in a particular collection. And you can also go by the classification level. So I remember I mentioned that these are our levels of seniority, our classification framework. Your pay would be related to those, and your behavioral expectations. If you know where you are in that scale, you can just select the appropriate lever and filter according to that. Another feature we've got in here that I can't show you without logging into the tool, but I'm going to flip back to our presentation and show you that from the presentation. Is I mentioned that if you're open to opportunities, you can be found and discoverable. So there's an option once you've set up your skill profile and you've logged in. So you do have to log in for this feature. You can use the tool entirely anonymously and never log in. But every time you close your browser, all the skills you've set up will be lost. All the information you've done, your career plan, all that stuff will be lost if you close your browser session. If you log in, it will all be saved for you. But you can log in with your private email address, and again, we won't be monitoring that. But if you log in and use an Australian Public Service Agency email address, and you say you're open to opportunities here, then a HR manager from your organisation might well discover your skills and send you an invite to apply for a particular job, or for a mobility opportunity, or a task force that's being set up, or whatever. They have the opportunity to find your skills through that. We also have for the HR managers, this find talent option, which is where they can set up that set of skills to do a search for people, or for a combination of skills. So they might be looking, for example, to set up a project team, and they can define the set of skills required for that project team, and then go looking for how many people might have the various different skills required by that project team. Or they can download the entire set of skills that their organisation has for the purposes of workforce planning. For that, we do have it de-identified, so that a workforce manager does not see who's got which skills. All they can see is how many of each type of skill they have in their organisation. So if they know in the future their organisation is going to need certain types of skills, they can see how much of that they've got, or what level they've got it, and how much work they might need to do to uplift skills generally across their workforce. They won't be told who's got which, but they'll know which skills that they need to work on or develop. When the HR manager does a search like this, the results they get, so there's the set of skills that they would have set up, they get a result that says how much each individual aligns to that combination of skills. Now, when it says matched, needs uplift, or missing, this is only in relation to the skills that the searcher was looking for. So this is not telling you the skills of that individual. That individual is not missing any skills. That individual's got their own complete set of skills. It's just that they don't have all of the skills that this individual, that this HR manager is searching for. And remember, if they're searching for a project team, they might be looking for 5 or 6 people with a combination of skills. You don't expect any one person to have all of the skills from that combination, but you want to find a bunch of people that have as many as possible. And this is how this search feature helps them find that. And once they find that collection, they can export the results and contact those people and see whether they might actually be right for the project team that they're looking for or whatever. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour through Career Pathfinder. We didn't explore all the features, but you can go online and have a play with it yourself. There's a URL here in this presentation if you get to see that later, or you can go to Google and type in APS Career Pathfinder and you will find it. And you're welcome to explore it and send us feedback. As I mentioned before, we'd love to hear your feedback about how we can make this tool even better for people across the APS and generally. Please let us know, and we'll work towards that. So thank you for watching through that. I'll pause now for more questions if there are any.
Okay, thanks, Grant. There have been questions coming in. I've been thinking, oh, we'll ask that one, but they've been answered. So that's been very well. We got one from Tristan Richards. Is the SciSec framework mapped against NICE, ISC squared, ISACA frameworks? If someone has an ISC squared cert, can they find out how it is mapped to SciSec?
That's a very good question. And at the moment, no. So we, at the moment, treat each framework independently. We don't have any concordance or mapping between the frameworks. So to navigate your skills across the different roles, you don't know if the roles necessarily have been mapped to which framework. Either the roles then have to have the elements of each overlapping framework mapped. Like, for example, there are cybersecurity skills in SFIA and cybersecurity skills in SciSec. So our roles at the moment in our typical APS collection have the skills from each framework listed. So if penetration testing is in SFIA and penetration testing is in SciSec, then penetration testing will appear twice in a particular role because the skill in both frameworks is identified. One of our future directions, where we want to work towards, is having the tool being able to recognize where skills in 2 frameworks are equivalent, so you don't have that problem. You can just set up your skills in one framework, and if that skill is recognized in another framework, then it will automatically find matches, even though you haven't said you've got that skill in the alternate framework. And that then might allow us to more easily include alternates like NICE and so on in our system. At the moment, we don't use NICE, and we don't have any equivalent mapping between frameworks.
They've got another question from Rania. Are the online resources created by APS, or are they sourced from different organizations? Can see collaboration from universities to help with these resources. Would love to chat, but I think the question is, are the online resources created by APS, or are they sourced from other different organizations?
So the learning resources are could be anything. We at the moment have mostly mapped external learning resources. So I mentioned LinkedIn and Pluralsight. We've done some work with Skillsoft and other organizations. At the moment, they're commercially available learning resources or free resources available on the web. We would love to work with more people about how we identify more collections and how we go into things like university and vet sector courses. We would like to be able to map to those. We need to have 2 things. We need to have the mapping of those, and we need to have the frameworks for those recognised by the institution. So we'd love to work with more people about that. We'll probably, the way we'd work those is we'd work collections associated with what organisations have available at the moment. We're trying to do it what's typical across the whole of the public service, but in reality, each agency within the public service has their own subscriptions to learning services. So a particular organisation that has access to Pluralsight, for example, they will preference and want to use learning resources from that provider, and so their catalogue would probably be heavily influenced by that provider. Other catalogues, and we get other organisations coming on board, will have potentially other preferences. And we're going to work towards a mechanism for users to navigate between the different organisations, collections, and catalogues, so that if a person is from a particular organisation, they can leverage and make use of the learning resources that their agency has access to. So we still have a little bit of work to tune that, but what we'll do in the future is try and grow the catalogues, but also help users to navigate them by identifying which sets of catalogues they most likely have access to.
Okay, we have one from Dave Henricks, which is addressed to SFIA admins, but I think it's more appropriate to you, Grant, on the basis that you've sort of said some points about making this open source. So the question is really, could we take a setup like this and put it in a playpen so others could log in and look around for ideas? I think you mentioned some of those aspects, but I think it might be worth covering that again.
So yes, indeed. At the moment, we're not set up for that to automatically happen. So at the moment, you can't, for example, log in and get a copy of our code base and go and play with it yourself. But we're working towards that. We're working towards setting up an open community where we can have people joining the project and contributing, and also taking off their own copies and setting it up in their own environments and running with it for themselves. We're not at that point yet. If you're interested in that sort of thing, please get in contact. Your input might help to shape how we do that, but at the moment we're not there yet. We're still working through what it looks like to set up a complete second instance of this tool in another environment. It'll be easy to exactly clone what we've got, but we would like to make it a little bit more tunable for individual organizations who might want to do that. So we're not quite there yet and ready to share that, but we're working towards it and happy to talk to people who would like to leverage that.
Okay, a couple more have come in quite quickly, so I haven't had a chance to read them first. But do any agencies integrate with the tool and their human capital management systems or learning management systems?
So integrating in the sense of systems to systems talking to each other, no. Integrate in the sense of making use of it and incorporating it into their, say, their performance management process, yes. So we are working with one APS agency, and remember, we've only just released this at the end of July. So we're working with one agency who is incorporating it right now in their new performance cycle, so their staff use this as part of their performance discussions with their managers, and we're going to take the learning from that to inform how we help other organizations incorporate it into their practices. So at the moment, we don't have any system-to-system integration. In the future phases, we do want to do that. That's on our longer feature development list. But at the moment, just integrating as in by practice, so that people use it as part of their process, but it's not actually integrated into their HR system as such.
Okay, we've got a question from Anonymous again, and this is probably a broader SFIA question, but I think it might be worth you answering it, Grant. Whether it's the tool or whether it's some aspect of your use of SFIA is this one. Does it distinguish the difference between experience and theory knowledge?
The tool itself doesn't. So where that would come into it is when you're using a capability framework, it's what that capability framework is describing that is relevant. So the tool itself has roles with the capabilities required in those roles identified by the capability framework. So in the SFIA case, we say a role requires these SFIA skills. Whether that's theoretical knowledge or actual competency, that depends on what the SFIA skills are describing. Now, we understand SFIA as describing competencies. And so therefore, when you're reading what's inside a role that's described with SFIA skills, we expect people would have those competencies as SFIA describes them. There may be other capability frameworks that don't describe competencies, that may just describe theoretical knowledge, in which case then when you're reading a role that's described one of those, you interpret the skills as that capability framework describes those skills. So it would potentially be different to the way SFIA works, but the tool itself doesn't make that distinction. We do have a mechanism for assigning knowledge with skills. So we do make a distinction about pure knowledge, but where a capability framework describes a skill in the form of theoretical, as in you've read the textbook and you know what the skill's all about, but you haven't actually exercised it, then that's a feature of the capability framework, and we don't distinguish those.
Thank you. And Lisa's also answered that and put a link in the response to a web page on the SFIA website, which addresses that point too. Returning to open questions, does the Find Talent feature just apply to the corporate license rather than an individual license? I could answer your licensing question, but maybe you better do it from your perspective.
Yeah, so there's no licensing consideration for us. Like I said, we have a whole of country license, so anybody within Australia doesn't need to worry about SFIA licensing, and there's no licensing for the tool itself. Anybody can log into Career Pathfinder and use it. Anybody can use it without logging in. It can do that anonymously. But the Find Talent feature is relevant to only APS agencies, Australian Public Service agencies, and the only authorised HR practitioners get access to that Find Talent feature. So they have to be authorised to conduct those sorts of searches, and they can only look at staff who are in their organisation. So people who have registered with an email address related to their organisation, and that would be through a .gov.au email address. They're the only people that will be found in that talent search. We have, when we've been talking to people about Career Pathfinder, had interest from the general public in being findable, as in a way of potentially being found for a government job, even though they're not in a government agency. We at the moment are not doing that. That's on our potential wish list, but it's not a feature that we're aiming in the near term for. If people wish to be found for APS jobs, we recommend you go to the APS jobs board itself, look for jobs that are available there, and you can set up a recurring search for yourself to be alerted if jobs come up in relation to a area of interest of yours. But there's nothing that you, and there are some registers that you can put your name on to be looked at if a job comes up. Sometimes the registers can be consulted and people can be advised that way. But Pathfinder at the moment does not do that outside an APS agency.
Okay, we have one more question, I think, because we're coming up to the hour, from Chi. Is it more appropriate to use personal email or corporate email to log in? If you are open to job, will the use of a corporate email alarm your company as well? I think it's kind of answering the question itself, but from your perspective, Grant, what would be your response?
It makes no difference unless your corporate or company email is from an APS organisation. If you're in one of our Australian government agencies, such as the Department of Defence or the Australian Taxation Office or something like that, then your .gov.au email address is the ticket to being discoverable for opportunities in your organisation. If you register under a private, say a gmail.com email address, you will never be discovered for opportunities, even if you tick that option for being I'm open to opportunities. At the moment, we don't authorise anybody to search anything other than their own organisation. So it doesn't matter unless you're have an APS agency and an Australian government organisation email address. It doesn't matter which one you use to register with.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Grant. Thanks for a very well attended and significant number of questions asked. Sorry, I've just seen if there's another one coming in. No, it's a statement of well done and seeing lots of opportunities. So thank you, Grant. A fantastic session. You're doing it again in a few hours' time for the next time zone. As well as saying a big thank you, I will say that you're probably open to follow-up questions via the email you gave, and indeed if there are questions more appropriate for the SFIA Foundation, then please contact the SFIA Foundation directly. But once again, thank you very, very much, and a particular thank you to Lisa and Jasmine, who were frantically typing behind the scenes. As I said at the beginning, we will make the recording available, and we will write up the questions and the responses as, if you like, key learning points and main themes to be main takeaway points, and make that available to everyone who registered.